My video on proper mountain biking trail etiquette has had some really good responses with some really good comments. So I want to follow up that video with this one where we drill a little bit more deeply into some of the things that I mentioned in that video. Now, we as cyclists can be some pretty opinionated people, so there are some strong opinions and comments about a few of the topics. And so I'm going to talk about those, but let's start with a few that are a little bit more benign that I did not mention in that first video. Now, I had mentioned that when you're coming up on a rider, call rider back before you get to the person, whether they're hiking or whether they're on a bike, just to kind of alert them that you're going to pass them. And then I said, just say on your right or on your left after you ask for permission to pass. One thing that I didn't mention is it's always good to say thank you and have a good hike or have a good ride, and that's something that I always do. Something else that I did not mention in the first video was using a bell on your bike, and that's actually something that I've used a lot in the past. Back when I had my single speed, I had a bell on it, and bells and single speeds just kind of go together for whatever reason. Now, I actually have not used a bell in a while, but they are a really good idea for a few reasons. One is they're a little bit less alarming if you're coming up on a hiker especially, but also someone on a bike. Instead of yelling out rider back or yelling out, do you mind if I pass? If you see them in a pretty good ways out and you do the bell, it's just a more subtle alert that you're coming up on them. And usually when someone hears a bell, again, whether they're a hiker or a biker, they'll step aside for you. And then of course, as you come around, just say thank you. Another good use for a bell is if you're coming around a blind corner and you don't know if there's a rider there or not, you can start ringing the bell, and that will alert them that there's a rider coming around the corner, and they'll either move off or they'll yell rider up just to alert you that there is someone around the corner. Now, this is especially helpful on a fast descent, again, where there's a blind corner, and you can hit the bell and it'll alert that rider. And that's a pretty important safety feature, not only for that rider, but for you as well. Now, a few of the more controversial topics. And the first one is yielding to the climber. So a lot of y'all out there were pretty opinionated that the person descending should have the right of way. And the general rule for etiquette is you yield to the climber. However, I do what a lot of you all out there said, and that is if I am climbing, I personally will yield to the descender, especially if I'm riding up in the mountains and it's a fast descent. It's kind of one of those do to others as you want them to do to you. So if I'm coming down a descent, I would love it if someone yielded to me. I'm going to yield to the climber if they don't move out of the way, but if I'm descending and they move out of the way, I'm going to take advantage of that. So again, generally the rule is you yield to the climber, but I think most of us, if we're climbing and we see someone having fun on a descent, we're going to let them have their fun and we're going to move out of the way. Now, I did have one person put a comment that on their trail system, and it was not in the United States, it was in another country, but on their trail system, they actually have a sign posted that the person climbing yields to the descender. So it may come down to if there are certain rules that apply to your trails. And the last topic that we'll talk about is the most controversial one, and that is riding with headphones. Now, I've mentioned before that I like riding with headphones, and I had a few people blast me for doing that. But riding with headphones is going to come down to your own skill level, your own experience. It's going to definitely come down to the trail system that you ride, and it's going to come down to your own judgment, and that's probably the most important component to riding with headphones. In one of my replies to a comment, I had mentioned that I feel like when I'm riding with headphones, my senses are more heightened. In other words, my sense of paying attention to what's happening on the trail, my sense of how the bike feels, and I actually like the fact that I have to depend more on feel when I'm riding with headphones than with my ears. In other words, if you're coming around a corner, you can hear your tires slide. When riding with headphones, I actually have to feel the tires, and it just kind of increases my skill in that aspect. But the most important factor is safety, and that's where you have to use your judgment. There are definitely some trails where you would not ride with headphones. For instance, if you're riding in an area where you're going on a fast descent with a lot of blind corners and you can maybe hear riders coming up the trail. I mentioned riding with a bell. You wouldn't be able to hear someone with a bell coming around a blind corner if you had headphones on. And so that's where you're going to have to use your judgment. Like I said, headphones are not appropriate for all trails. Now, it just so happens on my trails, a lot of people ride with headphones, and when I ride, a lot of times it's on my lunch break, and I will often ride without seeing any riders, or if I do, it may be just one or two, so there's very few people sharing the trails. And even when I do ride with headphones, I'm not relying on what I hear to avoid riders in front of me. I'm relying on what I see, and on my trails, that works. I can easily see someone coming up the trail, and yes, we have blind corners, but still I'm riding within my limits to where if I have a rider coming towards me, I can see them in advance and avoid them. Now, like I had mentioned previously, I think it comes down also to your skill level. If you're a new rider and you're still figuring out the bike, you're still figuring out the trail, you're not going to want to ride with headphones. I wouldn't recommend it. It's not safe. I've been mountain biking for over 20 years, and a lot of those times I've used headphones. And my skill level is to where if I suddenly come upon a rider, I can brake appropriately. You know, a beginner might panic and squeeze the front brake and go over the bars and injure themselves, or maybe even the rider coming towards them. So like I said, it's going to depend on your experience and your skill level. And along those lines, if you're a slower rider, so you're new, you're working up your fitness, so you're going to probably have a lot of people coming up behind you. In that case, you're not going to want to ride with headphones. I'm generally one of the more faster riders on my trails, and I rarely have someone pass me. You know, just there's a lot of things to consider when riding with headphones. So to sum up the headphones, like I said, judgment is the most important factor. If in doubt, don't do it. And like I said, also consider the trail system, if it's safe or not safe to ride with headphones. So that'll wrap up this follow-up video to proper mountain biking trail etiquette. And I know you're going to leave comments below, so go ahead and do that. And I just want to say that I really appreciate the community feel that I get with my channel. 99% of the comments that are left on my channel are excellent. They have good thought, good feedback. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.